Welcome to Nerds in the Machine, brought to you by Nerd Vision, helping lead-focused organizations rapidly grow their revenue. If you're interested in a free growth consultation, visit nerdvision.co. Today, we're exploring the feast or famine cycle in the real estate world. I'm your host, Eric Smith, one of the founders of Nerd Vision and the host of Nerds in the Machine. I'm privileged to be joined today by Dr. Daniel Nussbaum, CEO and founder of the International MLS. Thanks for joining me, Dan.
My pleasure. I don't know if it's a privilege, but that's okay.
We'll see at the end. So before we dive straight into the topic, let's start with a little story. You've got an interesting background. How'd you get into real estate? What do you like about it?
How to get into real estate? Well, my life story, if you will. I first was a dentist, and I practiced for 22 years, and then I got married. After I got out of dental school, my ex-wife was somebody that was a homemaker, and I suggested to her that she ought to go into real estate because, I bought my first house when I was 27. And then got my second at 30, had a second home at 34. And I said, why am I paying commissions to all these other people? You might as well just, that's crazy. Let's at least save that money, right? But I was also fascinated. After I was a dentist, I became a licensed financial advisor, and I managed portfolios out in the Malibu, Calabasas area, California. And did that. And then the market crashed not after I started. And I said, I didn't really want to do this anyway. It just didn't seem interesting enough or exciting enough for me. And having to be tethered to the tape, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
The stock market crashed and interest rates went down. And I said, I think it's going to be a good time to buy a home. And I think that at some point, this was 99, 2000. And I said, I think before you know it, people are going to want to go online and they're going to want to look for homes. So I bought up hundreds and hundreds of realty.com domain names, and then actually started a couple of local entities out in the LA area for my ex-wife and also, for the family, right? And then out of thin air, using a couple of domains that were in the LA area, we had people like Shaka Khan in the car and Peter Gallagher from the OC and, et cetera. That's just the nature of the area, right? So I said, hey, I think there's something here, but that wasn't really honestly, my game plan for me as much as just getting that started. And, I really was fascinated with the idea of creating the International MLS. So, I did some research, legal research, and I did some just Wikipedia research to find out, the first United States MLS was at that time. I started this about 15 years ago. Theoretically, though, I started it more like 20, 25 years ago. But the first US MLS, using today's date, right, in 2025, the first USA MLS was created around the late 1880s, right? So the MLS system that people are familiar with in the U.S. is really just a system that's predominantly used in the U.S. and Canada. The markets are very, very different outside of North America, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, so and in the U.S. at one time there were like 1,000 or 1,100 MLSs, now down to about 500. And I said, there's just has to be a better way, all the way around, right? And with the technology, let's bring everybody together.
Wow. And so you were really the first to think about internet and how real estate could play into that.
Well, the people in the United States, for one thing, they can't understand that the United States is global. I mean, if you're standing in the middle of Piccadilly Circus in London, right, the United States is certainly global, right? So we actually built the company from the outside in, bringing in developments initially, to promote developments. And I said, okay, because I had gotten contacted by developers from overseas, and they wanted us to promote their developments. And I said,
Hmm.
okay, well, how is this going to really work, right? Because if I have the exclusive development listing, right, I've got to have agents that want to sell it. And I said, okay, let me come up with a little plan here, because if you're an agent in Chicago, you're not going to want to be just having your website all about properties in Costa Rica and properties in Panama, properties in Mexico. So I said, you know what I need to do is create one functional ad unit that will have all the developments. So kind of like one thing led to another, and within a number of months or maybe a year, we had about 300 developments in 25 countries. And I said, okay, what I got to do, and I created what has now become our International MLS search, but at that time it was a development search. And this way, any agent in the world could have it for their own website. And if they got a lead off their search widget, if you will, they could make a referral and make money. And
Wow.
okay, so we could make money as part of whatever we were doing, but they could make money and they could have it for nothing, kind of thing. So then, um, back in the day, before United States MLSs or people were really syndicating, and
Yeah.
we were syndicating our properties in data feeds that we were sending overseas, right? And then
Hmm.
to give you an idea how backwards the United States industry was at the time, I reached out to the CEO of a major MLS, and I said, "Hey, you can work with us. We'll do this, and there'll be no charge. All you have to do is send us a feed." And you know what he said to me? What's a
What?
feed?
Oh
Honestly,
my gosh.
I couldn't believe it. I'm not going to mention where,
Wild.
because that was about 2015, I would say. But before
Yeah.
that, and I tell this tongue in cheek, when we started sending out the property data feeds overseas to get leads, we got a client interested in buying something in Spain, and we sent the client there to look at a property, and they didn't buy one of the developments. They actually bought a resale property, and we made no money. So I said to the team, I said, Houston, I think we have a problem, but I'm a problem solver. That's really kind of what I am. So basically, I said, okay, so what we need a broker in every place we have a development, so that if they don't buy the developments, we can refer them to the broker, and we can get a referral
Mm.
commission, right? So
Yep.
the first area I called was an area where that what person went to buy in Spain, and I looked them up on Google, and
Yeah.
I called her up, and she said, Daniel, what you're doing is fascinating. I'd like to be a part of this. And I said, what do you mean? She said, will you be willing to promote my listings? Now, keep in mind, this is now 2010, 2011, which is like, light years
Yeah.
in this field, right? So she said to
Yeah.
me, will you promote my listings? And I said, sure, how many you have? And I'm figuring she got 10, 20, and she said 5,100. And I said, excuse me? And she said 5,100. And I said,
Wow.
sure, sure. I mean, I'd be happy to do that. And she said, I'll send you a feed. And I didn't know how to take a feed. I knew how to create our data, and I knew how to send a feed. But I said, this is like electricity, right? You got one plug that goes into a wall. The wall's ready for the plug. This isn't rocket science, right?
Yeah.
So we took her listings, and one thing led to another, and the next thing I knew, we had about 150,000 listings in, I don't know, maybe 30 countries. And then a little organization called the National Association of Realtors reached out to me to collaborate on a little website called realtor.com when they were
Yeah.
wanting to start their international segment. And so we were like one of the first data providers to realtor.com international. And then sort of, our model morphed from a free to list commission share to everything is paid subscription and membership. So it's a very different, more mature model, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And now we created like this membership, for people to be members. And we signed up some, major MLSs and associations that partner with us. We have just a little under 500,000 members and a little under 700,000 listings now.
Whew. Wow. All of that from a conversation about not wanting to pay realtor fees on your own houses. That's crazy. So, I mean, I want to get back to the international MLS in a minute, but let's pivot for a second. You've been in this industry now for a long time, really at the forefront of thinking about sort of the evolution of this industry and what's possible here. What's the cyclical nature of real estate? I mean, we see it all the time where, realtors can't sell houses fast enough. And then all of a sudden, nobody's buying a house. What drives that? What are the factors, in your opinion, that make that cycle happen the way that it does?
Okay, so having been in managing high net worth portfolios and knowing the cycles within the stock market and all assets in play, this is what we're going through now or have gone over since 2020 is a classic example of this. Okay, in my view, we would not have business cycles except for one thing: human error. And since there is human error, we have business cycles. So let me just use this the last 5 years as an example.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So now some of these things were in my view, were outside the Fed's control, but some of them were inside their control, and they failed to act. So, and then you can actually take some of this knowledge and replay it in your mind versus the 99-2000 stock market crash, and see it. Most of the assets or asset bubbles or growth phases come from a relatively steep yield curve. The bond market knows everything. If you're managing money in the stock market, people will brag and say, "Well, I beat the S&P 500 by 18% this year," meaning maybe the S&P did 10% and I got 11.8, right?
Sure.
Or I beat the S&P 500 by 30%. Instead of 10, I got 13, kind of thing, right? But when you're managing bonds, that you can say, "Hey, I returned 4.10 and the industry average was only 4.03, right?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my general philosophy in managing money is, a lot of these companies, they really lie about what they're making and what they're doing. You can't necessarily always know that, but the bond market tends to know everything on a macro level, and they take all the data, and they have been taking all the data for years now, putting it into machines that are then crunching it, and the bond market's a great predictor of the cycles, right? So like when the yield curve was inverted in 1999, and Alan Greenspan still raised rates twice, that was like taking you by the shirt collar and throwing you down to concrete.
Ooh,
Because
yeah.
that precipitated the Nasdaq going from 5,100 to 1,100, right? Which is the worst stock market decline in our lifetimes. Don't believe my kids. I'm not that old. I don't go back to the Great Depression or the crash in '99. 2020, what is it, 1920?
Fair. Yeah.
So let's just think back to what was going on with the bond market 2017 to 19. You had a growth phase, and the housing market was strong, and everything was fine. And then in 2019, the yield curve was getting very, very flat. It was getting towards the end of 2019, maybe 2 or 3 months before the onset of COVID, the yield curve was very, very flat. So how does that happen? The Fed, finagles the money supply, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, an asset, whether it's a house, whether it's a stock, it's really a factor of how much money is in circulation. I mean, seriously. My dad's $19,900 home in Long Beach, New York, now sells for about $850,000, right? So it's not like, I mean, granted they did a little work on it, but let's be
Yeah.
serious. Let's be
Yeah.
serious, okay?
Yeah.
It's still the same frame. I saw it.
Right.
It's still the same frame.
It's still the same property,
It's
right? The
right, right.
property itself didn't grow in
No,
size.
no, no.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
postage stamp property.
Yeah.
So no, it didn't. So basically, the Fed was looking to create an economic slowdown back then. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then, as best laid plans of mice and men, COVID came, and you were really staring into a black hole. There was a zero economy, zero. You couldn't go to
Yeah.
restaurants, you couldn't travel, you couldn't do anything, right? So the Fed absolutely flooded the money supply, right? But they did more than the typical. Yes, they drove down the Fed funds to 0 to 0.25, and they met. But what they also did, and this applies to the housing market. I'm going to get to that, right? This applies to the housing market. Is what they also did is they did something called QE1, QE2, QE3, QE4. I mean, what they were doing was basically manipulating the bond market for the long-term rates. So they drove down the 10-year note to 0.31. 0.31 for 10 years, right? I mean, did anybody really think you're going to be
Yeah.
in COVID for 10 years? I mean, what?
God, I hope not. Yeah.
No, but no.
Yeah.
So
We thought, it was going to be a couple of weeks. I don't think anybody
no,
thought
no,
it was
no.
going to
I
last
thought,
as long as it
well,
did. But
the doctor in me says no. It's going to take a couple of years. It's going to take a couple of years, and that's optimistic. But it's not going to take 10 years, right? In my view, maybe I was lucky, maybe my thinking, but unfortunately, but they. So what happened is the rates got to be so low, and the only way you could really bring the economy back, and I applaud the Fed for that at first, was to drive down the 10-year note, and the mortgage rates typically vary. There's another there people you read how the mortgages basically track the 10-year. That they do,
Mhm.
but there's also another factor in there that I'll explain. Okay, you just don't read about this factor. Okay, but I'll explain it to you. The typical rule of thumb is whatever the 10-year is, the mortgages are about 1.7 to 2.2 above. Okay, so if it was 0.31, you could see getting to a 2.5% mortgage. Whatever, right? But what they did, they didn't let it go that low. They varied it, right? So, in other words, they play with that variable. And before I backtrack to where I was just at, when the bubble got created, that variable wasn't 1.7 to 2%. It actually reached 3.25, because that was the Fed and the banks basically saying, we know this doesn't work. This is a bubble, and so we're not going to
Yeah.
take the risk, because we're
Yeah.
going to expect properties to go out, right? And the residential market is one thing. The commercial market we could talk about separately, but on the residential market, what they didn't do, the Fed, is it was smart to start creating people wanting to buy homes, right? What they didn't do is take away the quantitative easing fast enough, because if they made the 2.75% mortgage a 2-month phenomena, and they made the 3% mortgage a 4-month phenomena, and then they raised the rates faster, you would not have had the quantity of people that have 2.75 to 3.25% mortgages that basically have said that it's a stalemate, because these people that want to sell properties, they think it's 21, and you can't sell a property with mortgages at 6.5% at the same price as 2.75. the numbers don't work. And you look at the numbers and you say that based on two factors: one, the price of the homes, the interest rates, and also the time. So what do you want to do? What do you want to do, home seller? If you want to sell the property now that the property is 3%, look, in my view, the ocean's going to lap at the shore. There's a lot of water on the planet. Okay,
Yeah.
that's just how it is. And I also think that there's something called the Home Affordability Index that the banks and the Fed and everybody follows, based on you can only afford to spend X amount of money on a home and still have a functioning economy, right? And where people don't get squeezed, right? And
Right.
the rule of thumb is typically 28% of your gross income. It's been like that for God knows how long, even older than me. There are things older than me, believe it or not.
The Bible, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just saying. So it just got, everything got out of whack, and so you had 2024. What people don't realize, that was the worst year in real estate in the last 80 years when you factor just looking at the market, because it was the lowest number of transactions based on population since World War II. Okay,
Yeah.
so that was the worst market. And I'm not talking prices decline, right? Because
Right.
we can get that's a different market. The valuation market and the transaction market are the two markets in real estate, when people analyze, right? So
Yeah.
right now with the rates going down a bit, I can see transactions starting to come back a bit, right? But I personally don't think this is the end of the valuation decline. That's just my opinion from studying all the cycles that I have. These
Yeah.
things, these bubbles, they usually don't end well. There's usually that capitulation phase at the
Well,
end.
the Fed, the chair of the Fed was talking, and I captured a little bit of that yesterday about how things are in balance, but they're in a strange balance, right? Especially in the job market, because there are less jobs available, but there are also less people because of everything going on with immigration. So it's balanced, but not necessarily in a good way. And so they're taking the Fed rates down a little bit, but being conservative about their approach, because it is not your typical balance that they're seeing. And I have to, that was sort of in my head getting onto our conversation today is that a good thing for the housing market? Announcements yesterday, decreases. Is that a false idol? What's your perspective on that?
Okay, so my perspective, when the housing market was, the prices were going up on all the homes, that's because there was a housing shortage.
Right.
There was no freaking
Oh,
housing
it's
shortage.
wild.
No, but
Yeah.
there was no freaking housing shortage. There was a freaking housing shortage at 2 3/4. At six and a
Mm.
half, there was no housing shortage. I go out at night. I
Ah,
go out at night,
yeah.
and I look up in the sky, and I've yet to see an invasion of Martians and people from all these other planets coming in to buy all these homes. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was an imbalance of the mortgage rates versus the
Mm.
quantity, right? And so forth. So
Yep.
I actually
Okay.
have I typically can analyze my own stuff separately from the Fed. Okay, um, and my analysis is when the bubble was there, the people that were really there at the end with the FOMO, the fear of missing out, they were
Hmm.
paying 42-44% of their gross income. So guess what? If the economy for housing takes that extra 14-16%, what does that mean? That means that there are less tires being sold, there are less cars being sold, there's less people going on trips, and only so far can people keep their lifestyle sustainable with credit cards, right?
Yeah.
Until they can't. So I personally think the lack of immigration or what have you, or the Trump policy of exporting people, if you will, um, I think that's like nothing. So I think what you're dealing with now is the economy feeling the effects of the people that bought homes at 7.5 and 7 and what have you.
Yeah.
And even now, if you're buying at 6.25 at these prices, right?
Right.
Again, it's a fraction of price and mortgage, right? So um, the economy has no money, and so um, this is what they have to do. But that's only one factor. And let me pull this into the real estate. Residential mortgages, for the most part, since the I don't know 2008 thing with the you know when the gardeners could buy $1 million home because they said they made $400,000, or
Yeah.
whatever, just stated income. Unlike that, for the most part, the residential real estate market, people take a 30-year mortgage. I mean, some people take a 15. What everybody
Yeah.
forget,
Most take a 30. Right.
right, but what everybody
Yeah.
forgets, there's a shadow market going on, and that's called the commercial real estate market. Okay, so the commercial real estate market. So I'm going to ask you, and don't be embarrassed if you don't know the answer. How long is a mortgage for a commercial property?
But gosh, I have no idea.
Five
I would have.
years. 5 years,
Well,
right? 5 years. No, wait. 5 years. So think about this. All the commercial properties that were bought in 2021 have rolling over mortgages in 2026. Okay, so if the Fed would not lower short-term rates, okay, on that, the banks would own all the commercial real estate, and the United States taxpayer would own all the banks. In my view,
yeah.
I may be
Yeah.
the only ones being vocal about it, but I think that's a very big factor because you're seeing in certain markets where commercial real estate has gone down already 60%. 60.
Hmm.
Okay,
Wow.
not six. Okay,
Yeah.
so there, and then there's various other factors at play. All the people that don't need downtown office space anymore,
Right.
and
Hybrid workspaces, all of that changing dynamics as
yeah,
well.
but keep in mind, everybody was working from home during COVID, and now people are not allowed to work from home in certain industries, right?
Yeah.
So that can't be the only explanation. I think the problem is that it's a ticking time bomb. I think the commercial real estate market is a ticking time bomb, and I
Where
and I
does
think
it?
and when you
Sorry.
read
Go
and
ahead.
when you heard why he lowered rates, why did he lower rates? He called it a risk management thing.
Hmm.
Those were his words. And what is the risk? I just explained you the risk. If the commercial real estate market goes under, if instead of 2.5%, 3% or 4%, they have to pay 7 or 8%, the numbers just don't work.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
for commercial real estate, there's no emotional attachment. Like I really love this bathroom, or I
Yeah.
or I like
My
or I
kids grew
like
up here. Yeah.
right. There's no emotional
Yeah.
attachment. It's just all a numbers game.
Yeah. So we're sort of in this precarious position right now. What is, if you could project out, let's say the next 5 years, if you can even look that far right now, like what does that look like for the market?
I think 5 years is too long to look out. I
Yeah,
think
right. It
no
sounds like
no
it.
no no it is. It's too long because you can actually have a couple of cycles. Historically, you can have a couple of cycles in 5 years. We did go through the biggest bull market from March '09 until basically now, right? I mean, I
Hmm.
remember I had dinner in Beaver Creek in March of 2009 after the Dow went from 10,300 to 6,500. I got introduced to the nephew of Lacey Hunt, the president of the World Bank, and we were talking, and he asked me what my outlook was, and I said, I think we're a couple of weeks from going on the biggest bull market in history, and he said, "You're out of your mind," and I said, I've been accused of that, I get it, and he said, the market's going to go under 5,000, and I said, well, it's 6,500. You're saying it's going to go under 5,000. I'm saying it's going to go over 10,000 and never go below 5,000. Will you bet me $100? And he said, okay. and obviously it never went below 5,000,
Yeah.
and it's sitting around 45,000. So it actually turned out to be the biggest bull market in history. And I made
Did you
that.
collect those? Did you collect the $100?
I haven't been back. I've been too busy working. I've been too busy working on the IMLS. But my friend that introduced me has a
Yeah.
ski out house there, so
Perfect.
he could hook me up there.
Nice.
When the time comes.
Yeah.
My sole focus has been on the International MLS.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that.
But why don't you ask me what my focus, what I think is going to happen over the next 2-3 years, because
Yeah.
that becomes more manageable.
Yeah, so let's do that. Let's talk
so
shorter term,
yeah,
2-3 years. What does that look like?
I'll even talk a little bit, my forecast from today. I mean, I think that in certain markets, prices of homes are going to continue to go down because the numbers don't make sense. Certain markets where people are like the mortgages or the pricing is sort of underpriced, where people have to leave Florida and Texas, Arizona, and California and find affordable housing. They'll go to these areas that not necessarily deemed to be the most desirable, but because they can get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home for $130,000, they're going to do it, right? And just say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, in the winter it's cold, dress for it, right? And so I think, one of the greatest inventions in mankind that most people don't talk about was Jim Carrier, his invention. You familiar with Jim Carrier?
No.
He created something called the air conditioner.
Oh,
Okay.
I know Carrier. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. For
Okay.
sure.
So, wait. So that brought people to come to Florida in certain times of the year, right? But that was just room air conditioners. In the 70s, mid to late 70s, they came out with something called the central air conditioning. And think about the migration, the demographic and socioeconomic migration of the United States from the north to the south, right? Because you can't live in Phoenix in the summer.
No.
You cannot do that, because when the night times go down to 97, you can't sleep, right? I mean,
Right.
you can't
Right.
do it. So the central air was a very, very big factor. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a rebalancing, but as the mortgage rates drop and the prices drop in some of these overpriced areas, the nicer areas are still nicer areas. I mean, that's how society has deemed it to be. Right? But you're seeing, properties in certain parts of Florida, which I'm more familiar with, because I think we have about 140,000 members just in Florida, and I don't know how many listings, and I get the data and I watch it, and the bottom line is that prices really want you can't take a house, same house, 123 Elm Street, if you will, and have it be worth $600,000, and then 2 years later it's worth 1.2, and you think that's normal. That's not normal. A property doesn't go up 100% in two
Right.
years, and all of a sudden, because the people aren't making 100% more money.
Right.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
not normal. It's not normal.
And you didn't suddenly discover oil on your property, right? Like nothing's really changed. You didn't change the footprint. You didn't change. I mean, even if you did a remodel, you didn't double the size.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
sort of my analogy to there were no Martians coming down from the sky,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right.
or yours, that it's the same house and same lot, right? So it's not normal. So a lot of times these down cycles can take years, and so if you're asking me my prediction, it's going to
Yes.
be a combination of price drop and what's called a time-based correction. So in other words, if inflation in the economy is 3% and the house does not go up in value over 5 years, you've actually lost like 16 or 17% when you compound. So that's what's known
Mm-hmm.
as a time-based correction, right? When your asset is stable. So I think it's going to be a combination of a time-based correction and an outright decline in pricing. I mean, until things get to wherever. I don't think mortgages are never going down, in my view, in my lifetime. Well, I'm old,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, I just don't see mortgages getting, below 5.5%. So I'm going to ask you a question, okay? And don't be
Sure.
embarrassed if you don't know the answer, because
Yeah,
I play this game.
I might.
Over the last, I think it's 55 years, might be 70, I don't know, something like that. What do you think is the average mortgage rate for 30 years?
I'm gonna say 6.5%.
7.7. So for everybody saying these are historically high rates, these aren't
Yeah.
even average rates.
Yeah, we're still in a really nice position as far as the rates go.
The rates are
Even
fine.
at
Right, they're
yeah,
not. Yeah, I
yeah,
don't. I don't. I think that in fact, when you saw Powell's press conference a couple years ago, he basically, when he asked about the housing market, kind of shrugged his shoulders and said the housing market will do what the housing market's going to do, because he's basically saying, hey, the housing market and the economy, you guys are just going to have to work it out. I mean,
right,
and there should be nothing done to prop up the values. There should be nothing. So I think the combination of a time-based correction and an outright decline. There's certain markets already have seen residential real estate go down 25%, and to me, we're not done. I mean, we're not done, because typically housing market cycles, the declines tend to last 5 years, which would make it 2027. My outlook is at the end of 2026 is a really good time to be looking for a home.
Hmm.
That's
All
that's
right,
that's that's my outlook. I think I
nice.
think I think for the people that know they're going to stay in a home for 10 years, 15 years, whatever, um, with the rates coming down, you could buy and it can buy. But the fallacy of you can buy now and refinance when the rates go down is this, and people in the industry don't talk about it. You know what it is? The bottom line is rates will go down because the economy stinks. So if the economy stinks and the value of your home goes down, guess what? Even if the rates went down, you cannot refinance unless you have at least 20% of the property. So that's a trap that I would
Yeah,
caution people to be aware of, right? You can't pay $1 million for a home, to use an even number, put down 200,000, and when the property can only sell for 850, refinance, doesn't matter if the rates go to
right.
two.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
I think those are the things I think are going to play out.
so for people that bought, let's say, at the height of the market, in the last whatever 4 years, as they're looking forward, are they in a hold position? Are they in a sell position? Should they be like, not a good time to sell your house? What's your perspective between, again, as you look at like 2026?
Well, life sometimes gets in the way. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
if one of the people that owns the house, the husband or wife, dies, or you get divorced, and what have you, and life gets in the way, right? So,
Sure.
and
Sure.
and right now, you obviously know sellers believe hold, and the buyers believe hold. That's why there were no transactions, right? So
Yeah.
that's the market finally spoke. And the market didn't speak right away, right? People, even though the fundamentals declined and even though the inventory was growing, people were still thinking they got to buy now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they ignored all the fundamental signs. In my view, there are certain markets that have such a glut of inventory, and they talk about a 5 6 month data, supply of homes being a market in balance. I don't think that's true anymore, because with the internet and everybody being able to access everything, you saw that at the height of the bubble, homes were being on the market in an hour, or homes were being on the market, or 20 days, right? So I personally think balance has been dropped now to 3 4 months, and if a market has, and I know that's not, I'm not towing the typical line that people use, right? Of 5 or 6 months, because I just don't believe that anymore. I saw places on the west coast of Florida when it rose from 1 month of supply to 5 or 6 months. having noticeable price declines. Okay, so the market was out of balance, right? And and so forth. And then the other thing is, um, what's a five? How do people define a 5 or 6 month days on market or infant or supply? It's based on how fast the people are going to actually decide they're going to get off their butt and buy a home, right? And what are the factors, right? So if the Fed, maneuvers certain things, it could change. But there are certain markets that really have, in certain parts of Florida, I think condos are the supply could be a year. I mean, and single family homes could be 9, 10 months. So it's
Yeah.
so, and people say, well, now's a great time. There's two other factors at play here, right? Um, one is the that you haven't talked about, right? One is right now nobody's really bought a home for the last few years, right? So there's a lot of so people that want to sell homes will tell you, and it's true. There's a lot of pent up demand. They're right. There are a lot of people that want to buy a home. Well, guess what? There's a lot of pent up people that want to sell their home.
Right.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
stock market, to detect where you think valuations are going to go, there's an old adage which is volume precedes price. So until the volume starts to go up, because you have a supply of homes, right? Let's say I'm not going to name ones because this changes, but let's say there's an area that's got an 11-month supply of homes, right? Um, they could start selling like crazy, but they
You're
could
right.
also be getting inventory coming on like crazy. Because in Florida, for instance, people here are dealing with them. The insurance rates have really gone up a lot. If they're
Hmm.
condos, they're dealing with the condo assessments problem based on the Surfside collapse. So certain markets can be, a little bit different from each other, based on
Right.
those things.
Yeah. Wow. All
Hey,
right. So
I've taken you over the half hour.
yeah. No, we're good. We're good. I do want to talk a little bit about IMLS though, while we have time together. So just talk to me about how does that play into the real estate market? How do you imagine realtors, agents, leveraging this service? Uh, how do you differentiate it from other, you know, tech portals? Um, how do you like to position it?
Well, we're a real membership platform, and also we don't advertise other agents on a personal agent's listing property. We have a little bit of a different model.
Mm-hmm.
We created, and during the pandemic years, if you will, we created all these products that the agents can have that other companies don't do. Like any agent that's a member of the IMLS can get our IMLS search of all our listings, it's close to 700,000 listings. They can have in 100 and something countries. They can have it on their website, and it's a product that can help them generate leads to make referrals, right?
Mm.
Um, and we have another search widget just for new home developments, where we have developments in I think 25 or 30 countries that you can have as part of your membership, and you can make money on the sale of new homes, right? Anywhere. We've done certain things like that, and we have listings in, I don't know, about
Yeah.
125.
So how many people do you have that help you run IMLS? Is it you, like in your basement with four screens? Like, how does that? What's the operating model
No,
look like for
no,
you?
no. We have right now we have a small model of actually employees, but no, I'm not in
Yep.
the basement. Not in the basement. But yes, I like to work from my home office for sure.
Yeah, me
Right.
too.
I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, I don't want to spend
Yeah.
the time commuting, and
No.
this is just great. Right. Very very comfortable. I have like an 8 foot by 3 foot conference table that I work off. So it's kind of
That's
organized,
nice.
kind of like organized chaos. But Terry is our VP of operations. He's been with us for 13 years. We met out in California when I lived in California. So he handles all the intricacies for the MLSs and customers and and that sort of thing. And we have a couple of programmers and but we have people that work with the company that are affiliates, if you will, that are representing us. They're kind of like commission salespeople that are
Hmm.
representing us and bringing us out into the world.
Nice. So I have to ask about uh, the big technology in the room, which is AI, because selfishly, like I love understanding how are people using AI? If so, how are they using it? Are they thinking about it? Is it helping their automation process? Like where does IMLS stand in terms of thinking about AI and you personally, like within the industry? Do you have any thoughts on how you can use AI or how you know real estate agents should be thinking about it?
Actually, I don't know about the real estate agents per se,
Hmm.
but for the portals and companies and MLSs, a lot of MLSs have adapted it already. There are real estate AI quote providers, if you will, and there's also obviously competition. Um, and But have I thought about it? It's beyond the thought. What I've really needed to do is discern the thoughts into business models and partnership and application, right? And so there are certain ethical things involved with this that are too intricate to discuss.
Sure.
But conceptually, I've got the concepts down, and I know what we'd like to achieve, right? For various factors, um, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm actually going to have a conversation with a company. He's on vacation. He's going to be back the end of this month. So I'm going to have a conversation with him in depth to find out if his tech company can do this.
Yeah. Great. Well, I mean, it sounds intriguing and certainly not something for you to push out onto the quote unquote airways. Um, but I think from our perspective on the you know coming more from a technology side, which is more my background, I definitely think that you're thinking about it in the right way, and that AI is not going anywhere. The automation, the ability to streamline processes, all of those kinds of things are going to be critical. And for in my head, when I think about realtors, I think about how important is relationships still? Like, are people still building
Very,
networks? Yeah,
very.
yeah. So if if you can take time from doing things you don't want to do and keep building your relationships, if AI can help you do that, uh, that seems to me a place where there could be real value.
AI is a tool.
Yep.
It's a tool. It's a
Yep.
tech tool. It's a revolutionary tech tool. And when you say is AI going anywhere, AI is just in the top of the first inning. There's two strikes on the first batter. I mean, so yes, it's going somewhere. And just like when I say, when's the last time you went to Blockbuster to rent a tape, right? I mean, yeah, AI is going to change things, and it'll so the other analogy is when's the last time you used AOL dial-up, right? You
Mm-hmm.
haven't, right? So think about it that AI has a long way to go in terms of refining itself, if you will. I read this book. My oldest son is a level 3 certified financial analyst, and he recommended this book called Crossing the Chasm. I forget who wrote it, but at any rate, it's about bringing your technology company to market. Great book. I actually have read it 3 times cover to cover.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
not
Okay.
it's not 1,000 pages, and it's kind of written easy to understand kind of thing. But there's when it comes to technology, there's the infancy and the early adapters. There's the main bulk of the people who will do it because they see it Nobody dies when they use it, whatever it is, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then there's always the people, especially in the real estate industry, who say, I've been doing it this way for 95 years. Why do I need to change? But the
Yeah.
thing I would say to you is, you look at some of these old brand names, if you will, in the real estate industry, and you see where their valuation is, and you look at companies like EXP or Compass or any of these like later entries, their valuations are significantly higher. Being the latest adapter isn't necessarily in your best interest.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
I go back to where you started. You were an early adopter, right? Back, you saw an opportunity initially, bought up all the domains, kind of before anyone else was really thinking about this, and now you're at that forefront discovery, tip of the spear, if you will, on this AI side, and trying to see, is it real yet? Is it not real yet? So it'll be interesting to touch base with you again and see what your thoughts were on a year from now. What is is AI for you or not? But let's wrap this up. I like to kind of leave it with a thought for the industry. You've been in this industry for a long time. What's the biggest thing you've learned in this industry? Or, you're talking to somebody that's just becoming a realtor tomorrow. They have dreams of selling Sunset. Like, what's the piece of advice that you would give to, to someone in this industry?
I'd give it to somebody in any industry. Whatever you think, it's going to cost more and it's going to take longer.
That's definitely true. Speaking from my industry, everything does cost more and take longer.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and so those are two different markets, if you will. So for
Yeah.
the agent, let's say, that's coming in, first of all, coming with a little money. If you're coming in with zero, nobody's going to want to give you something if you're not going to pay a lot of a lot of percentage of what you're doing for it.
Hmm.
So, coming with some money, understand you have to pay an MLS, you have to pay for a website, you have to pay for this, you have to pay for that, and then you want to have a little marketing budget, right, to do it. And marketing is kind of challenging in today's world with the internet because it's not cheap, right? So, you may want to come in and figure out a way to factor your growth model, if you will. I forgot the other part of what you.
Yeah. Just like, what was one of the biggest things you've learned within the industry?
Well, okay, so at the level I'm at and what have you,
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
the industry tends to move at a glacial pace when you look at it from the institutional side. Okay, like when I mentioned to you that there were like 1,000 MLSs and now there's about 500. I would say that 4 years ago, okay, and when I started this what I'm going to tell you about didn't exist, but I knew it would be because it would be common sense. Okay? So let me tell you, 4 years ago or 5 years ago, if you wanted to work with an MLS and they'd send you a data feed of the listings, it could take a programmer 60 hours to map it and make it work, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
that's just for the MLS number one. MLS number two had a different feed spec, so you had to have a programmer map this feed spec individualized, and it would take 60 hours. So when I tell my investors what took me the last 2 or 3 years, well, there's an organization called RISO that has come up with a standardized feed spec where now if we match whatever it is, it could take us 2 hours, not 60. Right?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
the technology has changed, and we were pretty much ahead of that, and we created something in our system, an API, so that we can, effectuate it. And now we actually work, and if they have a data feed provider, that handles 150 or 200 MLSs, once you map for that one data feed provider, right? Because some of the data feed providers vary with how they send it, but there aren't that many. There aren't that many of them that really matter. There are two that have come to mind. That out of the 500, there are probably 200 or a little bit more that we can get it from either of those two. And the others, the really big guys, they have their own. It's okay if it takes a week to program it. It's okay.
Interesting. Okay. All
Yeah,
right. Well,
so part of my evolution, if you will, or our
yeah.
evolution, is trying to grow and time it to build everything so when the industry itself would be ready for what we want to do, we could actually do it.
Hmm. Well, I think it's an important thing to think about, that glacier pace, especially if you're a change agent, right? Like you are, where you're preparing, right? You understand common sense, you understand where things are going, but now you're waiting for the market to catch up, for the key players in the market to get to where you've been 2 years ago, and you're just like twiddling your thumbs waiting for that to happen.
But keep in mind, common
Yeah,
sense is
yeah.
not so common.
I think that's a good place for us to end this conversation today. Common sense is not so common. Well, listen, Daniel, this has been absolutely fantastic. I think you really helped me understand a lot about what drives the ebbs and flows of the market, some of those key factors that teams maybe don't think about when they're trying to predict, how their own businesses are going to go, how their own, market coverage is going to go. So I think that's been fantastic. Up to you, but if people want to talk to you more about this, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Not your mobile phone, but you want them to contact you through IMLS or not at all?
Um, well,
No pressure. I'll
no.
just give you the opportunity.
I would say send it. You can send an email to info at info at the THEIMLS.com. Info at the
Awesome.
IMLS.com. Right.
Great.
So that if Terry can look at them at the same time as me, so he could
Perfect.
decide which ones I have to handle, or somebody else can look through it. That's a good way to filter it.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, listen, thanks for joining me today and giving this nerd a glimpse into the real estate machine. I really
Hey,
appreciate it.
thanks for having me. I was
Yeah.
considered something of a nerd in high school. No, really,
Nerds are cool now.
yeah, I was president of the High School Honor Society, right? So
Nice.
I was considered a nerd. So I'm cool with that.
We got to stick together.
I'm cool with that. It's okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. You have a great day and a great week.